have something to say?
Are you there? Holy crap. On Thursday, we decided that we were going to check out the Woodville Cemetery, Union Hill Cemetery, Woodville. We'd heard some stories that if you got real quiet at night, you could hear Civil War soldiers' cries and maybe hear some things. And of course, that's all hearsay. We weren't really sure what we were going to get ourselves into or what was going to happen when we got there. But we met here at the office with just this excitement. You know, we'd seen the shows on television and we thought, you know what, why can't we go do what they do? And why can't we share some of the history and maybe some of the haunted tales about places here in town? So we went and we got to the cemetery right as the sun was starting to set. And it was real quiet, there was no traffic, there was nothing going on. No people were there, no traffic, no anything. And we really didn't know what to do when we got there, so we went back on every bit of ghost hunting lore, anything we had found on the internet, anything we'd seen on television. We just used that as our basis to be able to go in and see if we could hear anything or see if we could find anything. So when we got there and we got out of the car, we were walking around the cemetery, the first thing we did was try to figure out what each role everybody was going to have. Bobby and Beth, two of our graphic designers here at the office, came to help us with this project. And Bobby kind of took on the role of the investigator. And one thing that he did first off was he went around to every single grave and tried to figure out the date to see if we could figure out who exactly in the graveyard had been there during the Civil War, who was buried during the Civil War, anything that had to do with the legends we had heard. We wanted to find those graves. And we found two individuals, two men that had fought in the Civil War, and they actually ended up being from the same company. One's name was James, and the other's name was Henry, if I'm correct on that. As the sun set, you know, and it got dark and everything, our first method was to just go out and walk around the graveyard. And as funny as it may seem, we just took my digital recorder that I use for all of my stories and just walked up to the graves and just began asking questions. We had seen that technique work before in other areas, in other ghost hunting places, so we just thought, why not? You know, we're all amateurs at this, we didn't really know. So we did that for a few minutes and we asked questions, and we went back to the car and we didn't really hear anything on it. We heard some noise, but we couldn't really distinguish. It could have been a car passing by, it could have been an owl, could have been anything. Then I had this bright idea to start looking for apps on my iPhone. And they make an app for everything, so why not an app for ghost hunting? And we ended up finding a couple of really good apps that worked for what we needed. And Beth actually downloaded a ghost radar app. We weren't really sure what it was going to do, but we thought, why not try it? So she downloaded it and we waited to figure out how to use it. So we get out of the car, and this is when it really got interesting. You know, we were already excited about what we were doing and already wondering if we had caught anything on the pictures we had taken or the film that Scott had shot. So we get out of the car and Beth has the app running. And as soon as we step out of the car, all of us were going to go back to one of the Civil War graves. We get out of the car and it says person. We really didn't know what the app meant or how the app was supposed to work, so we didn't think anything of it. We walked a few steps further and all of a sudden the phone went off and it said the word mama. Beth and I looked at each other and we got chills when it happened because we weren't expecting that. And Bobby was behind us. He came up to us and he asked us again, you know, what did that say? And we told him it said Mama, and he said, guys, come take a look at this. And as he'd been on his journey through the graveyard that day, he saw one of the gravestones had the word Mother written on top of it. And we were standing, you know, less than 2 or 3 feet away from that stone. So that kind of put a little chill on us. So then Bobby began just asking questions. And someone said, you know, did you have any children? And instantly the phone went off and said nearly. And I got to thinking, well, maybe the children died during childbirth. So I asked the question, you know, was it painful? And the next thing you know, the phone says imagine. So we were really excited about that. Then we went up to 2 of the stones where the Civil War men were buried. And we began asking questions and stuff at that moment. And we didn't get a response. But we walked away from the grave of Henry and walked back over to James's grave. And we didn't mention names, we didn't mention anything. So we went to ask the grave, you know, hey, you know, were you in the Civil War, or are you here? Is there anyone here? And the phone said Henry. And so we thought that was really neat. You know, how in all of that can that come up with a word that has that kind of connection to what we were doing? We might not have found anything specific, but from what we thought, you know, there's definitely a coincidence that there's somebody buried there from the Civil War named Henry, and we downloaded this very good app from what we've read that could help us distinguish that. Well, I'd heard the stories about Matheny's Bridge just from people that live in the county. I'm not from here, so hearing the story of a haunted bridge wasn't anything uncommon for me. Every place has that story, but I was very interested to see what this particular story was compared to others. We utilized our Facebook page to try to figure out if anyone else had heard any stories about Matheny's Bridge, or if they had their own experiences. And we had a couple of people respond to that, and we took some of their suggestions with us when we went out there. When we got to Matheny's, the first thing we asked ourselves was, is this the correct place? It was right on like a main highway. Cars were passing, very dangerous area if you weren't prepared to walk that way and you didn't have the proper stuff for night. It was a little bit different, but it also was a little bit more spooky, a little bit more scary than what we were expecting. And we got there in the daytime, about an hour right before sunset, just to do some filming. And it didn't seem too spooky at the time, but as Beth and I were trying to cross the bridge on foot, trying to get over to the other side, that element of fear kind of hit us, and we started to wonder, could something be true about the stories? Is there something to this?
We're here today in Macedonia at a site known as Matheny's Bridge, named after a gentleman who owned a grist mill, Matheny's Mill. It was also buried in the local cemetery.
The next thing that we did was we went up and we looked at the old Antioch Cemetery, and up where the church is right beside the bridge. Some of the stories that we've heard is that a lady gave birth to a child in the church, and either the child came out evil or it was very disfigured. And because of that, she took the child and ran down the hill and threw the child in the water and killed it. And the legend is that the child still haunts the area, and that if not, you can hear the cries of the baby. The cemetery was a lot spookier than what we had at Woodville. None of the graves, or the majority of the graves actually, weren't labeled. We couldn't really read what was on them. A lot of them were broken. We did find the grave of the Culpeppers family, and we did find the grave of Mr. Matheny, who ran a mill in the area.
Laura, Beth, Bobby, and Scott at Matheny's Bridge, Matheny Cemetery, the grave of Mr. Matheny. EVP session. Mr. Matheny, we understand that you had a mill here in town. What happened to your mill? How did you die? Do you know anything about the stories of a child being thrown off the bridge? Do you know the name of the child?
That means it's the strongest. Oh, something back there. I saw something. You see that? Is that a firefly? Yep. There it is, right there. James Steeple.
Can you hear me?
Awesome. I just got chill bumps. Bobby is going to sit the digital voice recorder down on the graves of some of the kids that died here. They're buried here in the cemetery. We're going to leave it, go down and check out the bridge and see what we can find down there, and then we're going to come back and replay it later to see if we pick up on any. One thing that we did try that was suggested to us on Facebook was dropping a lollipop or a sucker off the side of the bridge. We tied the lollipop to a string, and Bobby and Scott actually walked out there and lowered it and left it. And the legend was that when we went back a few hours later or 30 minutes later, however long, that the sucker would have been eaten, or you could tell that the sucker had been eaten.
Animal. Hey, look what Laura's holding.
Wow.
Either.
Over the water. Alright. I'm gonna set this down. There appears to be something on it already. Very quick. We're going to go ahead and lower this down. This is our intact sucker.
So we left it and let it hang there probably for a good 30 minutes to an hour. We just left it.
So what we're gonna do,
When they got back to check on the sucker, they went back across in the middle of the night. It was dark, and Beth and I waited for Bobby and Scott to come back over.
It's about 8:30. We're back at the lollipop that we've lowered over the side of the bridge. You go ahead and bring it up. Look at that.
And that is not touching the water.
And I had just mentioned to Beth, just out of being funny, I said, oh, they're going to break the sucker. They're going to have another one with them, you know, just to pull our leg. And we laughed that off, not thinking anything about it. But when Bobby and Scott got back, their faces told us everything we needed to know. Bobby held the sucker up and he said, guys, something has eaten on this. Something has licked this sucker. And we actually had an extra sucker with us, and we opened it and compared both of them, and just from looking at it we could tell that something, we're not sure what, had actually licked the edge of the sucker. When we got back to check on the toy, we had left a camera running just to see if we could get any footage of anything passing by, and we were real surprised to see what we did see when we got back. And there's a spot in the video where really, really quickly you can see something, some wispy type of light or white energy or something, whatever it could be. We're not sure what it is, but it comes across the side of the toy as if it was there and it got scared and it left. Matheny's definitely had that classic scary feel to it. Again, none of us knew what to expect. We'd heard the legends, but I think all of us had this little bit of fear of danger and excitement running through our veins all at the same time. It was pitch black dark, so dark out there. There was no ambient light. At least at Woodville, we had a little light from cars passing by and a couple of other street lights. But here, we had nothing but our flashlights. And it had this really interesting element of fear to it and scariness that really made the whole adventure a lot of fun. I do think that the history behind the area is really relevant to what we were doing. You know, it would be interesting to see if a woman really did throw her child off, or if there was a legend or another story about a mother doing something like that. The graveyard itself was even creepier because there was nothing else around us but one lone street light at the front of the church. So I think that this overall experience and the footage that we got later really reminded us that, okay, maybe there is some truth to some of this stuff that we're doing. We may look like we're having a lot of fun and everything, which we are, but I really think that we're onto something, though I'm not really sure what it is yet. I'm not gonna lie, when Beth's phone went off and said mother, and Bobby went over there and shined his flashlight on the top of that gravestone and it said mother, my hair on my arms just went up. It was just the craziest feeling you could ever imagine. We weren't expecting to get that kind of result, and I know that the app said it was for entertainment only, but that's the kind of stuff that, how do you explain it? I think a big part of doing something like this is the question of, is it real or is it not? How do you explain things you can't see? Does it matter if you can't explain them or not? I mean, we were out there having fun, but we were also out there trying to figure out some history too of the area. And I think that through trying to establish that history while having that little bit of fun, that we're going to be able to uncover some pretty interesting stuff about not only Jackson County, but some of the surrounding counties as well.
Bye.